And actually, it's funny. I mentioned it to Nia, my wife, and she was like, "Yeah, I use the products all the time." So like, she was very familiar with the brand.
Hmm.
And so I found it very interesting. It was started back in like 2014, and the lady who started it, I think her name is Monique. She used to be a nurse, and so she was a nurse for like 10 years.
Hmm.
And I believe it was like up until 2020, her and her husband bootstrapped the company. They hadn't raised any money, and they were using like loans, and so it's pretty interesting. Scrappy founder story.
They
And
was
then I
getting it
believe
out the mud.
they was seriously getting off the money. And I believe it was 2021. They took their first investment. I think it was a Series A, $100 million, $100 million check. That's a big check, especially for a Series A. We know that.
And
Usually
for
in the
that type
series,
of company too.
exactly for that type of company. Usually in the Series A, I mean, typically a company might sell up to 20 to 25%. And so just based on that rough estimates, a lot of that hasn't been publicly disclosed by the founder or anybody. I would estimate that company to be worth at that time at a fundraising probably between 400 and 600 million.
Mm.
And that's pretty big. And so even at that time, they had worldwide distribution. They were in over 100,000 stores. And so that was really like a growth,
Hold
almost
up,
like a
hold
growth
up, hold
capital
up,
round.
hold up, hold up. They bootstrapped to that?
They bootstrapped it up.
Come on, bro.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yo, what's good, guys? How y'all feeling?
Man, I'm feeling good, man. I can't complain.
Having a good week so far?
Man, I feel energetic. I just got off of an executive coaching call, so that was very positive.
What is that?
Man, so I got into it originally maybe 4 months ago, and I got into it because Launch House offered it to me. One day, Launch House was like, we'd like to support some of our founders, and they asked me if I wanted to be a part of this executive coaching and program. In which case, we would meet up with a handful of other founders from different cohorts, and it will be mediated by one person, and the person is not a founder; they're more like a coach, I guess. And we meet once a month, and we do check-ins, and then we also talk about challenges, and then I guess sometimes, and then we just do like different exercises. Like it just depends on what the coach has in mind.
No, that's dope. I've heard about it before a few times, but never knew what it actually entailed. Would you say so far, like the benefits that you've seen from it has been positive?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. It's free coaching. So with that being said, you can see the value easy. Coming from somebody, like, would I pay for it? I would pay for it at a later stage of the company. But since I'm getting it for free right now, why not?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I've actually thought about trying to be a coach myself, actually. Not necessarily right now, because I don't have the capacity, but maybe like becoming like an executive coach. I don't know if I would focus on one specific area, but I feel like that's something would be fun. It would be fun to do.
What was like when you had that thought? What was the motivation for you to want to say, you know what, coaching may be something I want to do? Like, why would you be doing it?
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times what holds back executives from making good decisions is really them getting out of their own way, right? And getting out of their own head and seeing things clearly. And when I think about some core strengths that I have, like, I'm decently good at being able to do that. There are some things I'm not really good at, but there are like some things that I'm like really good at, which is like taking a step back, seeing things objectively, and just like kind of getting out of my own way. And so I feel like I could offer some real value there that I've seen people pay for coaches. And I'm like, yo, I could definitely do that. And not only can I do it, I can do it better. So yeah, that was kind of like what I was thinking.
Hey man, you just sold yourself. Some of our listeners gonna hit you up, man.
I gotta have the time, man. I ain't got the time right now. But still hit me up though. I'm always down to connect with people.
Facts. So what's the first story, man? I know there's been a lot going on. It's been top of the year.
Whew, it's been crazy the last couple of weeks. All right, so earlier I posted a couple of links in the group chat about a couple of hacks that's been happening, but one that was like really surprising and stuck out to me was LastPass. So I've actually been a user. a paying customer of LastPass for several years now. And so when I saw the headline that says that hackers stole customer backups, I immediately dropped that in the chat. And I'm like, what the hell does this even mean? Does this mean all my data is compromised? What am I supposed to do with this? I was hoping to get something from Rodney on like what his thoughts are on it.
What is LastPass before we kind of get into the nitty gritty?
Yeah, so LastPass, and Rodney, feel free to correct me, but LastPass is just a password manager that simply allows a user to store all their passwords in it so that as you browse the internet and go to different sites, you just have a easier way of accessing your passwords through one tool. So it kind of has, think about it as a folder for like your passwords essentially.
No, so this is super serious because their whole value prop is keeping your passwords safe.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And not only just passwords, but like encrypted notes, like you can put encrypted notes in there. So like you might have, like social security cards, whatever, like whatever you want, your wallet, your private keys to your wallets, people store all type of stuff in these vaults.
Yo, that's crazy, man. Rodney, what are your thoughts, brother?
Yeah. So Dre hit it perfectly with the definition or description of LastPass. Essentially, it's a password manager that stores. It's supposed to store your passwords. I've also been a customer of LastPass for a very long time. I first got LastPass probably like in 2012. So I'm not gonna lie, I've had LastPass for a very long time. And so what that also means, though, is that they have a considerable amount of my passwords as well. But what I do want to say, though, is given this statement, everybody definitely needs to switch from LastPass to something else. That's something I'm in the process of doing, but also thinking about their security a little bit differently. And, so like to some people, they'll say, what's the point of having a password manager? It seems so insecure. And these type of moments will make that argument more, quote unquote, more true. And, but a lot of times it's the convenience of, when you have 100 services, you know how agonizing it is to keep re-entering the password, especially if you just don't know it. And every website requires a different set of passwords, different characteristics, different lengths. It's not always easy. And so LastPass, that's what they were trying to do. But then you have others like 1Password, etc. And then I think now people are wondering, like, where can I go? Should I go to 1Password or something else? And, and you have some people who are like, I don't even store my passwords online. I just keep them in, note on my phone. And, and all those things are cool, but, no such thing as full protection. We can start there. There's no such thing as full protection. Now, in LastPass's case, though, this is complete damage to their business. I hope, like Brian said, that their business is protecting passwords and everybody's stuff got stolen, then they failed to do.
Trust is gone now.
Yes. Yes.
So how do you even begin to migrate away from tools like this? Because it feels like I got like hundreds of sites in there, like a bunch of stuff. Like, how do you even get off of this thing?
So personally, I have a different strategy in storing passwords now. And I think it was triggered by, I may or may not have mentioned this on the podcast, but I got my phone stolen, a few months ago. And I had to change a lot of passwords. This person had access to my phone with no password, no passcode. And, so I went through tons of different two-factor resets. And, I realized that I hate to call people out, but for example, like Authy, for example, it's a very trusted two-factor, app. And one thing that I found was that you can change the number without verifying the change of the number with the original number. So for example, if I was on Authy.
So they could bypass it basically.
Yeah, it's kind of pointless because, for example, like in the case where I can just change my phone, like if I can just go into your account and then change your phone number associated, and it doesn't even text the original phone number, or there's no other extra step of verification, then essentially you're just changing the phone number just for the sake of changing the phone number, and you're not actually like protecting anything. But anyways, let's get too sidetracked. I actually think my passwords differently, meaning that there are certain passwords that I'm fine with sharing on my LastPass or 1Password or whatever I decide to go to, but I wouldn't know exactly how to migrate because that's actually not what I'm doing. I wouldn't know, to be honest, but what I can say is what I'm doing is that creating sets of passwords or patterns and they're like patterns that I know or only you can personally know. For example, combining, the address you were born in with, your dad's, year that they were born, and et cetera, et cetera. And you don't have to just do that, like just have one password forever, but you can also say, for example, if it's a food app, then food apps are associated with my mom, and this will maybe your mom's birthday. So there's things that are more personable to you. And even if you got hacked or compromised on any level, it might damage one part or one segment of your life, but it wouldn't take over your whole life, which is what happens to a lot of people. Their whole life gets taken over for identity theft. Or, for example, like Dre said, people will store all types of stuff on LastPass, not just passwords, credit cards, social security numbers. There are literally fields for this. And for example, even a private key to a crypto wallet, like Rylan. So like that, that's a life-changing thing. If you don't know your crypto wallet is, say you don't hear the LastPass news. Say you don't hear the LastPass news. And so you just have a wallet sitting somewhere, and one day you wake up and like the wallet's empty. Nobody will save you. It's done. It's done. Yep. So, I personally think that people should migrate. At the same time, I wouldn't know what to tell them about that, because that's not necessarily my strategy. I'm taking a little bit more harder strategy just off the fact that I've already been compromised. If you get to my place, you might take it to, okay, I don't really trust anyone now. But, for the most people, I think some type of migration. And I think, to be honest, if I had to guess, 1Password is loving this. Any competitor, they're loving this, and there's probably some step-by-step guide on how to transfer over within, 2 minutes.
They probably made it super hard to find now.
Do you think Safe would ever get in this business?
Of storing passwords?
Of storing passwords.
So yes, to answer your question simply, yes. It just looks a lot differently, because right now, basically what LastPass has done is that they created a centralized password manager, and they have encrypted everything, but they've encrypted everything with their own encryption keys. So if they get compromised, then, it's encrypted, but it's still, there's levels to it, and they ultimately manage the keys. No difference than if Coinbase, they're a centralized kind of wallet. You don't have to actually deal with your actual wallet itself. You just have to deal with the Coinbase account.
Yeah, it's custodian.
Exactly, to the custodian. And if the custodian gets hit, then everybody get hit. And so, with Safe, there's going to be aspects that we have on the cloud, but a lot of the things that we're going to do are going to be more focused on empowerment or giving people the ability to do certain things. And so when I think about storing passwords, I don't know exactly how that product looks today, but what I can say is that it will turn into more of I don't know if you guys has this happened to you guys before, where if you go to your website, like for example, my bank account, if I go to my bank account now, sometimes Apple will ask me, do you want to use, my bank will ask me, do you want to use your laptop as like a security key? And then I'll say yes. Yep. And then my MacBook will have me put my finger on there. You know what I'm saying? And that is like a form of a private key, because what that's essentially saying, exactly, like nobody else has your fingerprint. And then also, what's the likelihood somebody else has your actual physical device, right? And which is one of the the essence of Safe is like that. I'm not getting too much into it, but just ultimately the idea of there are devices that are authorized, and it shouldn't just be account based. It should be, device based, just like how, your actual fingerprint is your actual fingerprint. Like it requires you to be there, and so, yeah.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned centralization earlier, because one of the things that was popping up in my head was, is this an opportunity for a decentralized play? And there's always going to be the risk if you're doing things in a self-custodial way, meaning like you as the user, you as the customer are responsible for the security of that. There's always opportunities for you to lose that private key, as Rodney kind of mentioned. But when it was coming back to the main value prop, which is that security and that trust behind, like my sensitive information is protected, and I know that based off what I know about blockchain and like how those, especially with it moving to more of a proof of stake model now, right, where security is supposed to be higher, things of that nature. Is there an opportunity in the market for a company like that? Because I'm even thinking about one of the ways somebody may be able to do this is with soulbound NFTs, right? And maybe you take advantage of ZK technology. That way, there's actually privacy rather than, these sensitive passwords being able to be found, on the blockchain just by going to the person's address. But with a soul-bound NFT, at least it would always be tied to that person. And there's actually this platform, I want to say it's called Human Identity. They do something similar to what you were saying as well, but they combine the soul-bound NFT with the device biometrics, similar to what you were just describing, Rodney. And so, yeah, I guess, yeah, my question is, like, knowing what's happening in kind of like that crypto world, Web3, is there an opportunity in the market for a player from
I
that?
do think there is an opportunity for decentralization as far as passwords. And I think blockchain is potentially a place where that can help, but blockchain is not necessary to have a decentralized system for passwords, although it could be an option. There are tools, though, in the crypto world, though, that are decentralized and can help. That have nothing to do with blockchain, but they are very adjacent to the crypto world that can help people.
What are
What
some
are
of those
some of those
tools?
tools? And the first one that comes to my mind is like PGP. And for those that don't know, it's called Pretty Good Privacy. And, the name doesn't make everybody feel that great, but, it's called a reality, right? And PGP was made, like over 30 years ago. And it's a encryption protocol, right? And it's lasted a very long time for a reason. People would argue it's not the most advanced technology out. And I would agree with most of those people. The thing is, though, you got to ask yourself, if it's not the most advanced technology out, then why are so many of the bad actors and or criminals and or anybody that is trying to do transactions, in the crypto space, why are they defaulting towards technologies like PGP? And when you sit on that question, you like the answer is clear, because it works. Because it works and it works well, and it works is good enough. And anybody that tells you the next advanced technology is so good that it'll never be compromised, they're just selling you on the next wave of bullshit, which is just the reality of it. And so, and I guess not to, and I don't want to, like, for example, Signal, right? Signal's a great app, amazing. I know they have new technology. They have something called the Signal protocol. At the end of the day, though, Signal is still it still requires you to go to a centralized place to have access, and you can't just, it's still a platform in itself. Whereas PGP, for example, is an independent protocol. It's kind of like having if you think about a gun as a tool, PGP is like having a shield, and so, but here's the thing though, people can use, just like a gun, people can use the gun to protecting themselves, but they also use it to kill. PGP is no different. You can use it to protect yourself, but you can also use it to hurt somebody else. And the way that you do that is through, for example, ransomware attacks, right? Sometimes people will get access to information internally, and then they'll use tools that are meant to protect. For example, again, going back to my gun analogy, a lot of people don't have guns just because they're murderous killers, but people will use PGP to lock down information that they illegally accessed, and then turn around and sell it back to the original owner. And the only reason why they can open it is because they have the key, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like going to someone's house and stealing their most prized possessions, putting it in the cage, and in the cage there's a note: "I got the key, but pay me first, and I'll give you the key." Right? And so, these tools are there, but I hope you guys see the parallel on the microcosm, for example, of the shield and the gun, but also to a wider, we're not going to go into it now, but to a wider perspective of why maybe people might look at, gun laws in a certain way, because, for example, the military is a centralized place. We should trust that. Police is centralized. We should trust that. But for the individuals that don't necessarily trust the military always to have their best interests at heart, they don't always trust the police to have their best interests at heart, and or they may be too busy dealing with other stuff. Individuals want the ability to protect themselves, for example, a gun or a stun gun or something non-lethal, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point being is that you could have both a centralized authority, but also have people be empowered individually. Whenever you lean towards too much on one side, it can get iffy. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not gonna lie, you did that with that analogy. Like, that was super clear and actually made a lot of sense in terms of even just looking at the law that way. I appreciate you doing that. That was a good mental model.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was. Hey, last thing on hacking. This is ironic. A couple weeks ago, I got an email that from this barbershop app that I use called The Cut. Have you heard of it? Have you ever used it?
I use it out here in Chicago.
Oh, man.
Oh shit.
So So somehow somebody was able to get my password to the app. I don't know how they did it, but they got my password and they were able to log into the app. And they basically changed the location and they booked the haircut. They booked the haircut in Florida for themselves. And luckily, like if they hadn't changed it, they hadn't changed the password. But if they had changed the password, I wouldn't have been able to get into the account. But I was able to get back into the account, like, cancel it, and like I had to delete the account and reach out to support. It was crazy. But I'm like, damn, how did they get my password? And I'm like, wait, I don't even remember what password I was using for that app. But I'm like, whatever password it was, it's probably something I used for something else. So I'm like, damn, they must have just bought my. They probably just bought my password. Like my password is probably just out there for sale, right? And this person just probably bought some passwords. Like I already know how this is working. And I was just like, all right, it is what it is.
Interesting. I'm not gonna lie to you. That is very targeted because they also got a haircut too. So it's like for example, I've been hacked. I told y'all my phones got stolen, right? So and I many services have been used, right? But that one in particular, like kind of like limits your demographic down. Like it slims it down. You know what I'm saying? And it makes me wonder, like the acquisition part of it. How did they acquire? But at the same time, though, I'm also a person that luckily, Dre, you're able to handle that. But just as I was telling y'all, some months ago, I'm sure for you, you're just trying to wonder like what your vulnerabilities were. But at the same time, you're looking at it like, damn, you just need a haircut, bro. You just need, damn,
It was crazy.
That's crazy.
What's crazy is he booked a $60 haircut. So I'm like, damn, he probably got a beard and everything. I'm like,
he got the face towel at the end.
My shit not even $60. I'm like, my man, he got the highest package. He got the premium package. I'm like, damn, he ain't gonna get that shit on me though. He need to try the other passwords that he bought.
So I guess go ahead.
Real quick. I'm gonna have to say, this is what I have to say. For some reason, hackers do have this tendency to get more luxurious services than you usually get, even if you already get luxurious services. Like I had nice stuff on my phone. Don't get me wrong. I'm a founder. I've been an engineer for a long time. I've been doing well in life, But some of the stuff I was like, okay. For example, I had somebody steal my phone by Instacart. It was like kids' food and not good stuff. I was like, you know what? This guy is desperate. He needs it. I'm not gonna trip on that. I'm going to fix my issue, but I'm not going to be worried about that. But it was when he started buying like the luxury Airbnb. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. So you want to spend $1,000 a day? You want to spend $1,000 a day, And so it's just one of those things, man. But yeah, I hear you.
Man,
yeah,
that's crazy. But
so
before
we move on to the next topic, I guess just for the founders out there, any last minute like tidbits on just privacy and protect, because this is serious. Like you could wake up one day and all the money you have in your bank account is gone. What are you going to do?
Privacy costs money. I'm realizing this. I'm realizing that. And privacy always costs money. Literally, name a private service that's not more expensive. Privacy costs money. When you have privacy, no matter like across the board, it's almost like a natural order of things. Privacy costs money. And if you don't put money towards privacy and security, privacy is different than security, but I'm just going to say it together. It costs money. It costs money to protect yourself. It costs money to keep things private. Even go to an Airbnb experience, right? Go to an Airbnb experience. The experience with 5 people is cheaper than one that's just for you and that person. The security for a club is cheaper than the private security that follows you around. So privacy costs money. It's not cheap.
Privacy costs money.
That's it.
That need to be on a shirt.
That's it. Yeah, that could be a shirt. That could be a hashtag for sure. So speaking of money, did y'all see the story of the gas founder that sold the Discord? Because he getting the bag. He's starting the year off straight. Like, I don't know what award he should get, but he should get something coming into the new year with probably a nice little acquisition bag from Discord.
Do we know how much he sold for?
I don't believe so. I don't believe it's been announced anywhere. I don't think they have to report it. I think anything under 100 million. Or there's there's like some threshold where you don't need to file like how much it was. So it must be under that. But it's I would imagine tens of millions of dollars.
But it's with that, and they did not take a single round of investment. They bootstrapped. And therefore, I think it was a team of 4? They owned 100% of the company. That's a pretty good return.
I would say like 50. What does this person say? It's 53 million?
So they did the numbers and they said they were. Yeah, they said they were doing, 14K a day, which is crazy just thinking about the way they make their money is you pay them, I think it was $7.99 or $5.99, something around there, to be able to see who gave you a comment. So the fact that they're making $5.3 million, run rate for the year, that's actually crazy. But yeah, they said 53 million. That's what the estimate was.
What's even more crazy about this is the founder. So I did a little bit of research on him, which I was a little bit familiar with his story because I follow him on Twitter. But his name is Nikita Beer, I think is how you pronounce his last name. So before starting Gaz, he was the founder of To Be Honest. And I don't know when he started. I think it was back in 2016, 17, something like that.
Yeah. It was right.
But it was on a similar product as Gas. It was an anonymous polling app for high school teens, and that app ended up being sold to Meta, or formerly known as Facebook, back in 2017.
Yeah.
And at the time, they had 5 million downloads. They had 2.5 million daily active users. And I think the app had only been out for 12 weeks. And so they really ramped up really fast. And then he ended up joining Facebook for 4 years after the acquisition, became a PM. And they happened to have a non-compete clause in their contract. And so he waited, I think it was like a 5-year compete clause, not compete clause. So he waited 5 years until it expired and then started Gas. And Gas quickly blew up to what it was. And I think the app has like over 5 million downloads or something like that, right? Like it's been going pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Real quick. Go ahead. One, big win for this guy. I know he doesn't care, but I unmuted him 2 weeks before his announcement. And I'm listening now. Whatever he was saying before, I'm sorry, Nikita. I wasn't hearing you. But look, so is he targeting high school? Is he just good at targeting high school audience? Is that what's going on? Is that what his thing is? Targeting the high school mind. Is that what he does?
I think he's good at just building social apps in general. And I think the target audience that he happens to be targeting is just high schools. But I think he just fundamentally understands like how to build social or consumer products. I really just admire him. It's just his thoughts on how to build products. So I imagine just how he talks about product. It isn't just necessarily high school, but more so like social or just consumer products. It seems to be like his specialty. Because they had a company, I can't think of the name of it, but it was a company that he started back in 2010, actually. It was like a lab where they just worked on many different products. And so, To Be Honest, wasn't the first app that they had made. They had done other products before that just hadn't really caught any steam. And To Be Honest just happened to be one that did.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Dre said. I think this dude is just really good at building product. And I want to read a few of these tweets that he shared in a Twitter thread a while back about what he's learned from the past 10 years, kind of building these, products and then going on to sell them for, tens of millions of dollars. But this one really stood out to me, where he said a reproducible testing process is more valuable than any one idea. Innovate here first. All things equal, a team with more shots at bat will win against a team with an audacious vision. And I know this is something that you've spoken to before, Dre, but it seems just like that mindset of, how do you create that magic in a very reproducible manner rather than, I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, I think my idea is going to be the next big idea without any evidence. And I seen this quote today where a guy said, have less confidence and more evidence, because when you have evidence, you have confidence. And I think, that's what this process kind of, gives you. But I was curious to get your thoughts if you had anything on that, Dre.
Yeah, man. I think really it's product is more, I've started to just progress in my career. I've come to understand that product is more engineering and like architectural design than it is anything else, right? It's like how you build how you build a system, right? And how you design a system, how you architect that system is what enables you to be able to iterate and test things really quickly, right? A system that is muddy, a system that has a lot of technical debt, a system that is just overly bloated and overly complicated, a system just takes devs a long time to ramp up. Like systems that are like that, and I'm sure Rodney can attest to, have been in some terrible ass code bases where it is shit like that. And companies and product and design and sales, everybody's trying to move fast, but they can't move fast, and they're just like slowed down by the engineering debt and the lag that's just there. And so I think a lot of it really stems to that. I mean, I even heard Robert Smith, who has done over 300 enterprise software deals. He did a podcast recently and he was asked, like, what is like one of the big things that he sees at the enterprise software level that prevents, enterprise companies from succeeding. And he said overwhelmingly, the biggest thing that he sees is technical debt. Technical debt at these enterprise companies, they end up killing them because they can't get out of it. And I think that is so true even at the early days. And so I think what Nikita's talking about is spot on. And companies that do that best, that come to mind to me, and who did that really early, and I think showed everybody else how to do that well, is like people like Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. Really at Facebook, Google, where like they really built like a culture of experimentation. And I think Google actually invented the concept of doing A/B tests. It was like A/B testing things. Like before Google, nobody was even thinking about that. And so I think just over the decades, we've learned and looked at what has worked and not worked for other companies. And so I think Nikita is just like speaking to that. And I think it's pretty spot on.
Nah, I definitely agree with you on this. Have y'all read this thread yet? He gave like 20 different things.
I dare read it. And some of his other threads too. He's sharp, man. He's sharp when it comes to like product execution and product sense.
Yeah, he definitely nails some right thinking here. But
I can't believe he sold the same idea twice, though. That's what's crazy to me. Hey. I don't know exactly how much they sold it to Facebook for, but again, I imagine it's tens of millions. And then they turn around and sell this one for like 50 million. Like, it's like every 5 years, he just selling a company for 50 million.
But I'm glad we started with this story. So when we get to this Mielle story, we can this provides some context, hopefully, behind some of, why she had to do what she had to do. Because this is the name of the game. And more often than not, if we really want to look at statistics, how many startups are really making it to the IPO level? Not many. There's a few hundred, that go public a year type thing, but there's thousands of companies that are started every year, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's slim to none. And so at some point, my whole thing is finance, man. We got to understand the finance of the startup game. Bro, there's a transaction that needs to happen because founders are just rich on paper.
Facts.
And
That's
so
facts.
I think his story is just an alternative path that like our community could just be learning from, because we can do the same thing. How longer do you have to be focused on trying to build something out for 10 years when if you got a skill set similar to this guy, and you can obviously, because of his relationships and, the information he has from like these different experiences, people want to acquire that too. But if you can package it up, which one you want, the promotion or you want the sale? They're not the same.
That's facts. And what's gonna be crazy is if he come out of this and do it again.
He is.
Bro, he gonna do it again. He gonna do it again.
He did.
He can't stop it. He can't stop it.
He did like an article or whatever.
So he's gonna do it again for sure. He did it twice. And if you do it twice, you have the confidence now. He got
the evidence for the confidence.
Exactly. So he's also someone we should listen to.
Facts. Yeah. Nah, bro. There was an article. I think he did it with the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, one of the two. But go look at his crib. My man is sitting lovely at the top of LA. His crib's it's so crazy, bro. Like he's good. Cause this is the other part we got. Bro, my nigga just got paid huge. On top of that, do you think he did not negotiate his salary package? Oh, so best believe he got some Discord stock on top of that. So when they go public or do whatever, that's gonna bang. On top of, he's probably commanding minimum $400K a year.
Minimum. That's minimum. Yeah.
Hey man, there are alternative paths to get into the bag, and this is one. Take notes.
Yeah. No matter what's coming ahead in the economy, he's straight.
Yeah. 100%.
He's good. So, speaking of selling, man, so you mentioned it already, Mielle Organics. There's been a lot of chatter in the Black Twitter about them. I did a very little research into them just to try to understand the brand. And actually, it's funny. I mentioned it to Nia, my wife, and she was like, "Yeah, I use the products all the time." So like, she was very familiar with the brand. And so I found it very interesting. It was started back in like 2014. And the lady who started it, I think her name is Monique. She used to be a nurse. And so she was a nurse for like 10 years. And I believe it was like up until 2020, her and her husband bootstrapped the company. They hadn't raised any money and they were using like loans. And so it's pretty interesting, scrappy founder story.
They was getting it out the mud.
They was seriously getting out the mud. And I believe it was 2021. They took their first investment. I think it was a Series A, $100 million check. That's a big check, especially for a Series A. We know that.
And
Usually
for
in the
that type of company too.
exactly for that type of company. Usually in the Series A, I mean, typically a company might sell up to 20 to 25%. And so just based on that rough estimates, a lot of that hasn't been publicly disclosed by the founder or anybody. I would estimate that company to be worth at that time at a fundraising probably between 400 and 600 million. And that's pretty big. And so even at that time, they had worldwide distribution. They were in over 100,000 stores. And so that was really like a growth, almost like a growth capital.
Hold up. They bootstrapped to that?
They bootstrapped to that.
Come on, bro. That's a crazy feat.
Yeah,
that's
it
not
is crazy.
Easy to do.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. They took out loans. They took out loans. They borrowed. They had to do what they had to do. But yeah, bro, they were able to do it. And a lot of it just comes from kudos to their execution, but kudos to just having a good product. Like they actually had a phenomenal product that people loved, and the best type of marketing is word of mouth. If you get word of mouth, you ain't got to worry about it. So yeah, it was super interesting. And so I just saw like on Black Twitter, there was a lot of uproar about them selling. So they end up selling to Procter and Gamble. For those who don't know, Procter & Gamble is a massive consumer products company. It's a 100-year-old business. So Procter & Gamble has been around for over a century. One of the oldest U.S. companies in the U.S. in America. And a lot of people were comparing this to back to Shea Moisture. So Shea Moisture is another hair brand or beauty brand that was sold back in 2017 for $1.6 billion to Unilever. And so at that time they got similar backlash. So some people were kind of comparing it to that.
How are they comparing it? Because I think that's what we need to get into, because 1.6 billion, that's not a small amount of money. It's a Black company doing that. Like, how often do you hear those type of exits and stories? And so what's the sentiments?
I think everything has to be taken in context, right?
Okay.
You like the way what you're saying makes a lot of sense, right? It's $1.6 billion. Like anybody would take that, right? But these are like customers who are loyal to the brand, people who probably support the brand because it is Black owned. And let's be honest, we do that, right? Like as Black people, we do that, right? If somebody tells us, hey, it's this Black owned brand is doing XYZ. And if we're already about to make a purchase decision, we oftentimes will switch our purchase decision to support a Black owned brand. We do that. We try to support each other where we can, as much as we can, especially as of recently. And so I think there's just a little bit of that from some of the customer base to say, hey, we've been rocking with you. We've been supporting you because you have been a Black owned brand. Yeah, you may have a good product, but it's that Black owned piece that really tilted me towards supporting you. And now you're kind of like selling out. I think that's what some of the customers are feeling. Don't make it right at all, but I think that's the general sentiment that I kind of gathered, when I was kind of reading some of the tweets. And I think that's what I saw too with Shea Moisture. It was like, hey, we supporting Shea Moisture. We've gotten you to the point where you're a $1.6 billion brand. And now you're just kind of selling out on our community. Like even my wife has said Shea Moisture products aren't the same. Like she said after they sold to Unilever, the products don't work the same to her, right? So she was a loyal consumer, and she's had to switch because y'all have watered down the products or diluted the products in a way where they don't react the same to my hair. So I think there's some of that like from the community as well. Like when these brands sell, the product changes, right? The product changes, the ownership changes, the incentive changes. There's a lot of things I think the community of people who support these brands kind of feel. And I think those feelings are valid. But on the flip side of that, look, if somebody walk in and say they want 1.6 billion, and they're about to give me 1.6 billion, I'm selling. Give it down.
Yeah, so, it almost reminds me of the Jackson State Dion situation, where they were saying similar, like he was a sellout. And I think my perspective on this is, yes, these businesses, Shea Moisture, Mielle Organics. Shoot, you probably could even throw in there. Who's the Black guy who also sold?
Tristan Walker.
Bevel.
Yes, Bevel. Walker and Co.
Walker and Co. Like the Black community definitely built them up. But I think on both parts, like maybe there's just a lack of communication and understanding on both parts. Just because, as you said, the customer, feelings and sentiments are valid, but also like these people can't be poor their whole life. You know what I mean? And I think also given our lack of understanding, because a lot of us aren't in these rooms or don't understand how the process of this game tends to play out. Like, I don't think we're thinking about the secondary consequences, right? Yeah, say for example, like Richard Liu. Yes, Richard Liu, sold his company for $1.6 billion, but because he got that 1.6, the wealth that he was able to take from that, and I think he now has like a venture capital firm where he invests in Black founders and things of that wouldn't have been possible. And so, like, part of me is,
I have to interrupt you, Brian, because you just
yeah, go ahead.
because you made an amazing point there. Sometimes you do have to take the money and one for your personally for yourself, your family, and your legacy, but also you drill in the heart like a very important point, which is taking the money allows you to free up your time to do other things, make impact in other places, and then the example that you were describing, that venture capital fund would not have been possible had that person not sold. Yeah, okay, in the interim or in the short period of time or like on the short term, people saw it as selling out or this or that. But at the end of the day, like you said, there are things he can do now that he couldn't do before. And so, for example, when I think about some of these founders, for example, I don't know too much about this current Black woman founder or just founder period who sold to P&G, but then also, but when you get money like that, that gives you the ability to do more to affect the community in more than just the hair lane. Like I think that we can't jump to conclusions about what people are going to do when they get their money, and also once they've done the job, they don't owe anybody anything else because it's everything was cash based. It's not like people were donating to her. People got something in return. These businesses are not like charity. Like they didn't. She didn't just get donations and then use that and turn around and sold it off. That's not what happened. What happened is she created a product that worked well with people that looked like her, and she kept that in mind. Same with Tristan Walker, and they created those products with people that look alike and who are not the standard, white products, that are mass market, and sold them, and then people bought them. I think if you were just donating, for example, I understood highly why people were, not to go too far into it, but when I heard about there being, corruption in Black Lives Matter, like as far as the organization is concerned, not the message, but the organization, that was disappointing. It's disappointing because in that case, people were donating to a cause. They didn't get anything in return. You don't get anything in return by donating to Black Lives Matter. Yeah, sure, maybe somebody got a shirt here and there or some type of a thing, but ultimately they got nothing in return. And so, when you find out that potentially, mind you, I don't know, but allegations of people selling, buying houses with the money and doing this with the money, that I get why you're angry about that because you donated to the cause, you put money in, and you without expecting anything. It's a charity. But with a business, we can't be connected to the outcome because it's a business transaction. Nobody who has bought products. I can understand customer frustration if there's lack of options. They might be scared there might not be other options, but we don't know. Maybe she takes this money and then turns around and says, I already know they're about to water that down. Here's the new brand. You know what I'm saying? And maybe it's at a lower cost because she has more money now. Who knows? There's so many potential things. And I think that we should avoid or try our best to trust more. You know what I'm saying? But in this case, nobody was getting things for free. She bootstrapped her business. She didn't get anything for free. Matter of fact, she did more with way less than even
every founder.
Yeah, like almost every founder that I know. So she didn't nobody donated to her cause. She made something good and people resonated with it. To Dre's point, yes, people, we have a choice between, supporting our own or somebody else. We will tend to go supporting our own. Hopefully I did that. I know I have friends that do that. For example, when I got my braces, it took me forever. Me and Dre actually ended up going to the same orthodontist, by the way, a Black orthodontist in Detroit. And that's primarily because my parents were like, we could get you braces now because there's a million different options for orthodontists, but we want to take you to a Black doctor. This is a big purchase, etc. So it took longer, but you know what? he ended up paying
We
a black doctor. You know what I'm saying? And so
we got to be careful framing it that way, because when you frame it that way, and
in which way?
when
Because
you frame it as like people are making a purchasing decision, which I feel like this is the reality. Like, you're speaking of reality, but what I'm saying is I think we need to alternate how we look at the reality. If we're looking at a purchase and it comes down to me just choosing because you're black, like that doesn't put that person in a position of advantage, because it shouldn't even come down to that. I should win off tops because my product is better. And I think,
okay, no, 100%, no, 100%. We're in agreement right there. For example, let me give you, like, going back to when I had braces, right? You know, I had the money to buy braces immediately. You know, we had the orthodontist we had the orthodontist all over, right around the corner. I lived, in the suburbs, 9 mile, if you want to be Pacific, you know what I'm saying? We had that. We didn't go and then go to an orthodontist and just get him because he's black. No, we got him because we knew that there are black orthodontists that are also just as good. So we just took a little bit more time to find a black orthodontist that was just as good. Back then, when I was younger, I was so focused on the result that I just wanted braces, period. So it did kind of frustrate me. But in hindsight, I understand what my parents did. And they didn't choose an orthodontist that was not as good as somebody else. They chose somebody who had a service that they could buy and that was valuable. And guess what? I don't want to go too crazy because I got a girlfriend. I don't want to go too crazy, but that money that we put in towards my smile back then, it worked out. It worked out. And he's one of the best. He's one of the best black
Yes.
orthodontists. He's one of the best. So I just say that to say, yes, I hear you and I agree with you. You should not just be buying products because people are black. And I think most of us don't do that. To be honest, I think when we realize that a product is not good, black, white, Hispanic, Chinese or not, nobody's getting more of that money. Like, I fail to believe people are constantly buying products that are not good just because of their race, whether or not they're black or not. Like, I fail to, a bootstrap business doesn't get to that level she's gotten to off of basically sympathy.
correct.
Like, that's
Correct.
not what happens. You know what I'm saying? So I don't if you're saying like don't frame like that, yeah.
That's how I'm saying not to frame
No,
it. Yeah.
I want to be clear. I want to be clear. Don't just think you're just going to come out with a product and we're going to look at your race and just buy it. You know what I'm saying? That's not the point. But I'm talking about, in this example, she is getting product because she earned it and made a good product. She got to this level not because she was black. And so for people to make this about, people need to try to, I understand consumer frustration. So I'm not going to take away from their feeling. They feel how they feel. But I hope they also understand that we have to understand the owners as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, how many of these people who are complaining are upset and upset enough to tell everybody about it? But if they were literally just took 10 minutes to think about if they have the opportunity to change their lives, their brothers' lives, their sisters' lives, their moms, their dads' lives, the kids, their grandchildren, if they have that opportunity, what choice would they make? And when you put it like that, we all know the truth. We know the truth. Unless, of course, it was something that, like a hill to die on, some type of hill to die on, like for example, like just a deep one, like murder or something crazy. But like a hair product, I'm not about to die on a hair product. I'm not about to die on that. Dre said, give me that offer and I'm taking that. I'm not dying on that. I'm not dying on that hill.
I think there's a larger lesson like that needs to be unpacked for like our community as well, is when it comes to understanding what ownership looks like in reality. I feel since ownership has been primarily driven across the culture through like hip hop music, I want to say it was like Jay-Z a few years ago, like on one of his albums, he started talking about it. People ain't really started to do their research and looking into these public companies and looking at what does the founder of the company now own now that the company is public. And I feel like people have talked to founders all the time who are naive to think that over the course of building a company, over the course of doing different raises and things of that nature, that you're going to maintain almost 100% of your company. In what world? You know what I mean? And I feel like that is just a preview of what most like consumers and just the general folks across our community probably think of like ownership. And part of the reason why they're probably calling her a sellout, because they're like, oh, you're giving up the whole company. When the reality is, this is one of the most common things that happens in business. It drives American business and capitalism. Think about it.
She's like, it's common, right? It's not like she's not doing anything that's specific to her race.
I think logically everything we're saying makes sense, but I see the other side of it where, again, it's a brand that people resonate with. And whether it makes sense or it don't make sense, people get emotionally invested and connected to brands. That's what brand is. That's what you do when you do brand marketing. You are literally trying to sell an idea in somebody's mind and anchor that brand in somebody's mind. That's the whole purpose of brand, right? Like, that's what branding is. And so whether it makes sense or not, like, people are just emotionally associated to these brands that they advocate for to their friends, right? I don't like when Black women in my circle have a hair product they like, they don't just use it. They tell their other friends, they make videos about it, they write about it, they talk about it, they share it. Like, they're invested in it. It's not just a product that they just bought from $5.99. No, it actually means something to them. And so I understand that part. Again, that's disconnected from the business, but I do understand like the power of brand. And when it's done right, it does look like the backlash that they're getting, because that actually means they did something right? Because what that really means is that they built a brand that is so strong and that it resonates with people so much that people actually care enough to say something about it, right? Because if they didn't care enough, they wouldn't say anything about it. So I actually think it's kudos to the founder that her and her husband have put so much sweat equity into a brand that people care enough about it to give their 5 cents about it, even if it's, disconnected from the reality and, far from what any logical founder would do. People still care about it. And so I understand that aspect of it.
I want to say 100%. People should get it off, get whatever they want off. You know what I'm saying? Like however they feel their attachment to it, go ahead, get it off. I get it, and which starts to make me think, okay, in the future, when these next brands, for example, that get built, even for example, I think Kylie sold her brand to whatever. I'm sure it wasn't a Black company, but it wasn't about. Nobody felt like Kylie was selling out anybody. Like they definitely criticized. Like they thought, like they tried to downplay her success, though. Oh, she had all the opportunities, whatever. But it wasn't like Kylie didn't sell to somebody because. And I wonder, but what I would say though is that I understand like the connection and the feeling. What I want to say though is like how I wonder in the future, is there an opportunity for, if there is that much attachment to something, then maybe we should own it, and it should be owned more than just by our consumer dollars. You know what I'm saying? We should actually be invested in it, and like buying it in itself is one thing, but when these events like an acquisition event happens, like the truth hurts. At the end of the day, the truth hurts now, because now it's like you never were really an owner. This never really was fully yours. Even though you were buying into it and you told your friends, the reality is you never really were that. And that's a hard reality. I'm not sitting here saying that people shouldn't feel that, because even as I talk about it, it doesn't feel good at all. But it makes me think though now, like in the future, when people have these businesses, whether it's Bevel or this Shea Moisture or whatever it is, is there a way to get more people involved? In which case, it's not just, oh, we're giving you our dollar, actually invested. And then, because when you're invested, you have a say so. When you're not invested, you're really like founders have to make the hard choice. Because I'm sure it wasn't an easy choice, but to Dre's point, at the end of the day, she did the right thing she made like the right culture around it. So people actually care, but people don't need to think though that it's their company though. Like that needs to be, but if there's a way to get more people involved, I think it'd be better in some way.
Yeah, no, and I think you're starting to see the early trends of that, right? I forgot the year it was, but it was under Obama when he came out with the Startup Act, which, led to equity crowdfunding. And if you think about a lot of Black entrepreneurs, obviously we know the stats when it comes to venture capital, so we're not really getting it that way. But I would be intrigued to just look at the equity crowdfunding and like how many of us have pursued those alternative routes and seen quite some success. They may not have turned into massively scalable businesses, but I'm sure there have been Black entrepreneurs across the diaspora that have built, successful businesses and still allowed the, community to participate. One that's coming to mind right now is one based out of Atlanta, fan base, right? I think they ended up raising close to $7 million off of equity crowdfunding and, allowing their community to participate. I want to even say,
I was thinking of fan base. I was thinking when I thought about that, I was thinking of fan base. That guy, he's one of the early ones.
Yeah, no, 100%. Isaac Hayes, man, cheat code. But I think definitely what they did with fan base is definitely dope. I think right now equity crowdfunding it's becoming easier to tap into, but I think it hasn't got the sexiness as like traditional VC has gotten, because I'm not even gonna lie. Say for example, in terms of like Seventh Ave, right, in our community being for like the Black community, if I was to raise again with the same kind of hype and like traction and support we had from day one from the community, there's no way I would have went VC. There's no way, because as we all know, once you become an owner, you have a sense of, I want to see this through outside of just the product being good. And I think that's what equity crowdfunding can allow, especially these Black consumer brands that are being built, and they do this with like great expertise to be able to capture. And I don't know if we would have the type of scenario that, we're seeing with this kind of backlash. Hopefully not.
I want to add one more thing.
That would have been like, especially because I know like in the early days of Seventh Ave back, back when it was, your invite to the cookout, you know what I'm saying? Yes, exactly. And those laws are new. And when I was thinking about it, yes, fan base is one of those new Black owned companies that is like allowing people to be engaged. And that means something. Those people are not only owners, they're owners. Like they have a stake in the game. Like you can't, unfortunately, if you're just a customer, one day the reality will hit you that you're just a customer. One day, and it hurts. Like to Dre's point, like all the frustration we see, the hurt feelings, is because ultimately realizing that, damn, like it's not like we don't have a say so. People are like, and they, people are gonna point the fingers, but ultimately I just think it just comes down to, our opinion wasn't taken into account. Were we taking into account, etc. And and it's hard when people are not putting, I don't know, because we give our money to everything. I don't know, we give our money to everything. So we like just a step further, and community rounds would be so dope to see more of, especially with these certain type of products. And definitely, Brian, and there was people bought into 100, like, of course, like in hindsight, but it's how it goes, man.
Yeah, we live and learn.
I think the other thing that this conversation kind of brings to my mind, at least, is alternative ways for founders to get liquidity without having to sell the whole company, right? Because I think when they did their Series A and they raised $100 million, I'm pretty sure the founders took some of that capital, right? Like that, all that money, I'm pretty sure didn't go to working capital within the company. I hope it didn't either, right? And so there are ways to where founders, if you're able to be as fortunate as they were, where they could raise $100 million Series A, that obviously means the company is positioned well and performing well, and so they have leverage. And so there are ways to where you as a founder can get liquidity, life-changing money, $20 million, 100, 50, whatever it is, life-changing money, and still maintain some ownership in the company. And so obviously they saw a different path.
You want to explain why that can happen and how it does happen? Because I don't want to assume everybody is familiar with how like secondary markets work and how they're different than like public markets. Most people are familiar with buying stock through Robinhood and things of that nature. But how do you actually participate in those secondary markets, especially as a founder?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in how to participate in secondary markets. However, I am aware that it is very common. It is not uncommon. So it is common for companies, especially those that are performing well and that have leverage when you're at the fundraising table, especially when you're raising significantly more than what is the average amount for a particular round. So let's say for a Series A round, let's say the typical fundraising size or fundraising amount is, let's say, 15 to 20 million. Let's just say that's just typical or average. It could be higher or lower, give or take. They raised 100 million. So clearly it was 3, 4 times, 5 times what the traditional is. So that just lets you know right there how the company might have been performing. So usually when that happens and founders are raising money, then they're able to sell, secondary shares and sell some of their personal equity in the company to investors. I would assume that's what they did here, considering that they didn't raise any money. They owned 100%. So any equity they had, any equity that any new investor would have purchased, unless that round was a debt round, which it could have been, they probably would have gotten some cash for that. And so that just means the founders would sell some of their equity to get diluted, and the company, are able to build whatever the value is of that equity. They're able to cash out, pay taxes on it, and then they get the cash for that. And so that's probably what they did, considering that they raised they were the sole owners. Or they can do a debt round, which is, if you do a debt round, then that means the owners didn't sell anything. And that could have been better or more advantageous as well, considering that they just sold to P&G. I don't know how much that sell was, but
if they had predictable revenues, that
that could have easily been it probably was $1 billion maybe, so that probably was a really nice exit for them. So there's many ways to structure. And so I think more importantly, you don't have to just settle for the option of just raising money from VCs as a path. You don't have to just settle for the option of selling your company to get liquidity. And you don't have to just settle for the option of going public, right? There are more paths to get funding, to get funded, and there are more paths to get liquidity. And so I think the lesson here is just to study these founders, study how other people are doing it, because there are many creative ways to do it. And I think we should all take a lesson from it.
Nah, facts. While we're just kind of, talking on the topic of, like selling out and things of that nature, there was this story I came across regarding like a Zambia AI copper mine. And so essentially there's this US company that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify like different materials that are important for developing like lithium batteries, which go in cars, our phones, etc. Batteries are very important. And so the company is called Cobalt Metals, and essentially they invested $150 million into this, Zambian copper company, which is dope. And it's, signaling, that there's a ton of opportunity over here in Zambia. But one of the interesting things that came from this was that the citizens are actually pushing back. And one of the stories, I'm pretty sure they just announced a class action lawsuit against this company. And I don't know, hopefully people are aware of this, but Africa is like the next big thing. And the Chinese, Europe, Russia, you can name it, have already started to stake their claim. And so this is one of the, coming out of a December conference between Africa and the US, this is one of those first steps the US is taking now to start to, have a position over there in Africa. But the people are asking it, which I feel like are fair questions. And I kind of wanted to get, your sentiments when you see like US companies going over there to Africa and, doing these kind of things. But so this copper mine is responsible for 70% of export earnings out of Zambia, and it contributes to 42% of all government revenue. And so people are curious about, what does this deal mean for, tax revenue? Is this going to bring jobs to the country, things of that nature? Because traditionally when these deals have happened, they haven't, right? And these people are living on less than $1.90 a day. And so curious to get y'all thoughts, Dre and Rodney, on this.
I have seen that China has been coming into, I think they're pretty much in every single country in Africa except for one or two, I think. I think maybe it's just one that they haven't been able to crack yet. So they're definitely making their marks. And it's tough to say, man. Again, it just goes back to what we just talked about. Somebody is knocking on the door with the bag in hand, and they're willing to like lift your people out of poverty and willing to help you. It's hard to say no to that. However, I think these countries should take a tip out of China's book, because, part of the reason why China is the way that it is in terms of business is because they themselves have been invaded by foreigners before. So they know what it's like when they have a free market that's open and foreigners come in and take over and do a bunch of shit that's not right. And so they've been really cautious about who they let inside their borders, and how, once you do come inside Chinese borders, like how your company operates. And so I think like a lot of these African countries, I hope they are being thoughtful in that way and not just signing on the dotted line without really understanding what it means to get in business with China. Because again, when you have a country that's that powerful, it may not matter in the next 20 years, or even the next 50 years, but what does it look like in the next 100 years? And I think that's how like countries have to think. Like they have to really think on a much longer horizon than a company. And so, yeah, I hope they're thinking about that. But
Now,
yeah, I
that's a
guess
very good point, because hopefully everyone knows that, what was that, just 40 years ago, the 1980s, China was considered like the poorest of the poor, and now they're a powerhouse. And so there's definitely lessons hopefully they can take from history.
That's good that you. That's a good reminder. 'Cause I don't believe everybody knows that, but it's good for people to know that so that they understand who China is. Yeah.
facts. So we'll see, man. We'll see. Look, I think, anything that gives people money, though, I hope those people take the money and invest it properly, and it actually lifts people out of poverty. Like, when you, again, looking at China, people criticize how they do it. People criticize the way their citizens are censored, the information is censored. And I get that. I totally get it. I also understand the human rights element to it as well. But I think there is something to be said about how China has lifted its people out of a large percentage of its population out of poverty, considering where they were. There are still a lot of people in China who are in poverty,
100%.
but they have done a hell of a job in a really fast time. And so really hope these African countries are able to learn from that. And if they're able to lift their people out of poverty in that same, because of, support from foreign investment like China or US or whoever is going there, then hey, I'm all for it, because that has huge, effects for next several generations. So, hopefully that's the case.
And one thing I would just even add on that too is, like, for the founders or investors listening, like, this story is showing me there's an opportunity to not only do business, but to also be community first, especially like when you're coming into a place where you may not be familiar, right? And you may not have context of the land. Like, I think this is an opportunity to like really lean into that and learn from the people and be with the people. So yeah, that story was interesting. One more I want to share just before, because I feel like people need to understand this because it ties back to health. But before we start to wrap up, is recently the FDA just approved a new law. So it's called the FDA Modernization Act 2.0. It was signed by President Biden back in December, but basically it ends the requirement for pharmaceutical companies to test their products with animals before, going to human clinical trials. And so this essentially means that instead of using animals, now these pharmaceutical companies, they can use things such as they're creating like mini organ just from like cells on like computer chips and things of that nature. They're also using AI similar to, if you haven't read about Alpha Zero or AlphaGo, what DeepMind is working on, go read about that, because they're using these big, transformer, the same technology behind ChatGPT to basically build these virtual cells where they're basically testing these drugs and products over code and machine learning. And then they're going and using it on humans. And there's a few benefits to them doing that, which is like obviously the speed to market and the cost associated, things of that nature. But yeah, I feel like there's potentially going to be some backlash to this, but I don't know if people are aware of this happening, because basically the law that it's replacing was established in 1938. And so it's been a minute since we've revisited this, but curious to kind of get y'all thoughts when y'all hear that, we're not getting any older. We're probably going to be taking medicine or, things of that nature over the course of our lifetime. And it hasn't. Does this kind of scare you? Like, what are y'all thoughts here?
I'm not as educated on it, so honestly, I don't even know. I probably need to do some reading on it. You frame it as something we should be concerned about. But,
Could you describe what are a couple of things that you think we should be scared of exactly? And before you get into that, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So, essentially, Biden passed some type of thing with the FDA where they do not need to test experimental drugs on animals before humans, right? So they can just go straight to human clinical trials.
Yep.
Okay. And before I give my opinion, what exactly are you scared of exactly?
Yeah. So what I am scared of is we don't know enough about the potential side effects of doing that, right? And I think there's an assumption, at least that I'm perceiving is being made, is that when we tested these pharmaceutical things on animals, it's because, as we know, humans come from a family of animals. And so it's not an apples comparison, but there's enough similarity to understand between, having this trial on this animal and then, doing it on a human to be able to identify, some of those discrepancies. And I feel like make reasonable assumptions about these drugs before they even go to market. And what I read was like, there's basically based off the animal stuff right now, the way animal laws work now, 90% of them don't even, end up going to human trials. So something must be working, right? And so I guess this is part of where I'm just curious and got to do a little bit more research as well is now is the new assumption that these newer technologies, rather if it's machine learning or if it's these virtual cells that we're creating to replicate like human organ, are they better? And what makes them better? What has been the data that has made them better? Because we're essentially saying if they're a better alternative, they're basically a better apple to apple comparison for doing a human trial and, this virtual kind of, technology based trial. And I just don't know how I feel about that, given it's a mechanical thing that humans created.
I think what you're asking for is transparency.
That's a better way to put it.
Yeah, I think.
But are you
Go ahead.
suggesting that animal and human trials are 1-to-1? Or is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that they're 1-to-1.
So I'm asking, if that's not what you're saying, then why do you think the alternative needs to be 1-to-1 in humans then? Because the current, or would be the former, given the new act that they just passed, the current testing platform would be animals, right? So if you don't believe that the current testing platform needs to be 1-to-1 with the production version, which is us, right? Then why does the next testing platform need to be? Or am I misunderstanding it?
Yeah, because I think there's something inherently biological that technology can't replicate. Like the data computers that Amazon have running in their centers, those are inanimate objects, right? Where this is an animal, regardless of the human rights stuff or whatever, it's a living object. And so we know its genes were created the same way my genes were created. Versus like, you have to rely on, and I think this is where transparency comes in, you have to rely on the fact that hopefully a human explicitly told this computer, this is what the genetic code needs to look like. Where with the animal, it is what it is because I can take a sample of that animal and it was dictated by biology rather than human, involvement. I think human involvement is going to lead to error.
But I'm not trying to kill him. I'm just asking the question. Though. But isn't our understanding of that isn't that the reason why computers are good though? Because I think like the switch to computers would be a misstep if we were trying to solve for if it was like unknowns there, you know what I'm saying? But if we fully understand like how an animal is and we can replicate that with machines, then I guess I'm not understanding what outcomes do we get with an animal that a machine can't replicate if we fully understand the animal? Or or are you saying that we don't fully understand the animal?
No, I'm not saying we don't fully understand the animal. I'm just saying the animal and the machine are not the same. And it's as simple as this. If you cut the animal,
why can't they be though? That's what I'm trying to.
It's as simple as this. If I cut the animal, it bleeds. If I cut the machine, it does what? It does not bleed.
Right.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter though.
That does matter. It's the difference between biology and technology.
But clearly it doesn't matter if Biden passes law, bro. It clearly doesn't matter. I understand logically it matters. Like, yeah, logically it makes sense that one bleeds over the other, but that's such a surface level of thinking about it. It's so much more complexity beyond the blood that can be understood by a computer, clearly.
Yeah, so
you know what I'm just saying. Right, but I understand what you're saying.
No, and this is what I'm saying. Once again, like when it comes to animal testing, obviously there has to be computers to support the animal testing in the way it's being done now. That's part of my issue is when the computers move from the supporting role to the leading role. I don't like. Is it ready to be the leading role? And yes, they might have signed this into law, but does that mean?
But the computers, bro, the computers have been in the leading role for a long time, bro. I think in the background, we just didn't know about it. That's the only reason why we were able to get a COVID vaccine so fast, bro. Think about it. RNA technology is enabled by computers. It is the only way we were able to get a vaccine.
But hold up. RNA is what? Biology. It's still driven by biology.
But what enabled? But okay. I understand that.
Okay,
I'm saying we should lead with biotech, not tech bio.
No, people, no, okay. In that case, I think everybody would agree. I think we are basing the tech off the science. Like, like,
Exactly.
like,
That's
like
what I'm saying. We are. We
that's what
exactly.
Grace
That's what I'm
saying.
saying.
Like, we're
Yeah.
basically, like, I think this is what it is, both of y'all. I just think Brown wants to audit it. That's all. He just wants to audit it and make sure. Like, he wants
Me too.
transparency.
Me too. Me too. I agree. I agree with you.
Like,
Bro. I agree with you.
I have to be able to trust this machine.
But I'm not. But I don't. But I don't. But I think it's a. But I. But I think I don't think it's correct. And I'm not saying you saying this, but I don't think it's correct to say machines can't do what animals could do. I don't think that's true. I think machines are like way better at a lot of stuff. But I do think it would be a mishap if we were building technology that wasn't based on science. So we definitely should lead. We should lead with that. But I do believe like this is a better step for us because who knows what this means? Can this mean can we rapidly test faster? Can we test different variations faster? Like
that they're talking
yeah,
about.
like there's a lot of counter outcomes of this that I think are super beneficial that we just simply can't do with animals. So I agree with you. There needs to be like guardrails in place where we're not going rogue. But hopefully it's the right step for
Dre
just
actually has a
human
good point. Dre had literally out of all the things Dre said, what I can say for sure is that we are going to be able to move faster because of this. You know what I'm saying? The effects of that are going to be, there's going to be costs and there's going to be benefits. I think the benefits will outweigh the costs at the end of the day, you know, but there will be costs. Best examples that I can think of is, you know, when you have, you know, and unfortunately, the best examples I can think of are the most unfortunate and sad ones. You know, when your kid is born autistic and can't even, you know, you can't even the parents are so frustrated because they can't understand, you know, they're desperate. You know, in that case, they'll pay anything to be able to understand just one thing about what their kid's trying to like say or give their kid a voice. Or for example, like to share with the audience, my dad had pancreatic cancer, same cancer that Steve Jobs had. You know, you get desperate. You'll try literally anything because you already know right now you have a terminal thing. Or even, for example, I look at Neuralink, for example, you know, I think people miss this about Neuralink. Elon often refers to, we're going to start it off with paraplegics, people who are disabled, et cetera, basically the people in the most need or the most desperate, you know, and those people are willing to try everything because they've already tried so many things. So yeah, they'll sign the waiver because in their opinion, it's worth it. Fuck it, it's worth it. You know, my life is worth it. So I'll try that. It's not up to me as an able-bodied person to tell somebody else whether or not they should be try this next thing that might work for them. That hope itself might even pull them forward. So it's, to me, I think that, you know, we should put it more on the individuals. We just need to make sure that individuals are not being, misled and use, you know, but for example, if people are working on cancer drugs for, you know, high blood, like drugs that obesity drug, like, and certain things that cause death and are like high death rates, and some people are like, for example, let's be honest, yo, I never met somebody that's 300 pounds, you know, and doesn't want to lose weight. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've never seen the show, what's it called, 600 pound, like 600 pound life, whatever. Like, those people.
That show's crazy. That show's wild, by the way.
People want help, right? And some of these people will sign a waiver and be like, you know what? My problem is so bad, I cannot get a handle of it no matter what I try. But if you're telling me this will do something, I'm willing to take the risk. I'm not the jury on that. Like, to me, I'm not the jury. I don't get to decide whether or not somebody gets to choose whether or not like they get to try another shot, try something else, try something new, try something experimental. So yes, there's going to be, like, to be honest, yes, there'll be casualties. Yes, just like the COVID vaccine, there will be casualties. We're going to see casualties in many different fields because of this, without a doubt. We're going to see casualties, but we can't focus on the casualties because ultimately we win the war, you know what I'm saying, which is the war on cancer, the war on diabetes, the war on obesity. We win the war, you know what I'm saying? So that's the bigger picture of it. And, you know, nobody's trying to go to that's somebody. Yeah, because the tests are not just, you know, and also people, you know, it's a big financial reward. So you know what? Like, we do have all the resources to solve cancer. Like, we have all the resources and the potential needed, you know, but there are guardrails that were put in good faith. For example, when I look back at like all the technological evolution and when they started passing a lot of these laws are like, you know, with science and engineering, like they're like, you know, 60, 70, 80 years, like they're old ass laws, you know, and back then I get it though, you know, they started to realize the power of science and mixing. Then they started realizing, oh no, we don't want somebody in this basement mixing up the next little concoction. Before we know it, we all dead. You know what I'm saying? So I get it. You know what I'm saying? But it was a fear-based thing. It was a fear-based rule. It was a fear-based law. No, you can't, just because you know about biology don't mean you could be in your basement mixing up shit and trying to test it out. You know what I'm saying? That's what they said. But guess what? They could never control that anyway. Going back to what Dre was saying, this was already happening. I guarantee you, without a shred of doubt, with no doubt, people were already doing this. Biden is just giving everybody the reins to say, hey, no longer, you don't need our permission now. Go.
But I think you hit on something that's very important too, which is like the business incentive behind this. If you think about the traditional argument that a lot of people have when it comes to pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies, when it comes to the war on cancer and Alzheimer's and things of that nature, people have always believed a cure has been there, but they're not incentivized to want to sell it or give it away because of the profits. Where now, if you think about something such as like this technology being out there in market and it drastically driving down the number of cost, but also taking advantage of the power of computers, similar to what Dre said, like being able to spot these patterns, therefore get to success quicker. Like it provides significant cost advantages to me, it potentially driving up their margins and hopefully, incentivizing them to put those world, game-changing drugs out there to help a lot of people who are suffering with cancer and things of that nature.
People, and when scientists, when some of our smartest people are less scared, shit happens. And look, it's a coin toss. I'll be real with you. Like, it's a coin toss. I can't say for certain whether or not it's going to land on heads or tails. You know what I'm saying? Because there is a scenario in which case we loosen up the leash and people get too excited, and before you know it, a teenager got a bioweapon that he go to the school with, and then everybody, you know what I'm saying? Like it can get real nasty. You know what I'm saying? But on the other end of it, yes, so like the war against all these things that we've gone, like we've run into, as humans, and and there's nothing more heartbreaking than seeing, somebody who has lived their whole life, and they're 22 and they get in a bad accident and they're on their paraplegic, they can barely talk. There's nothing more heartbreaking than, a 4-year-old who's constantly going in and getting chemotherapy, at the children's hospital. Like these things, these are such important problems that we have to take the risk. We have to take the risk, and we just got to make sure though that we put some guardrails to protect everybody, still give some level of protection, you know what I'm saying? But we got to be able to open it up because, we don't want any more kids born with cancer, or developing cancer. We don't want that. We don't want somebody to, if they get a back injury, they can no longer walk or they can barely move their jaw. We don't want any of those things. The only way we can move faster towards the goals is by making it so people are less scared. Because also too, even like what Dre said, people are already doing this, but just the mere fact that Biden is giving people the permission makes it relieves the level of fear amongst some of the brightest people we have in the country. You know what I'm saying? Because they're like, how many people you know don't do things because they like have they, even though they could do whatever it is that they want to do, there's some overarching fear or narrative or thing of getting in trouble that's like preventing them from even going there in their mind. Biden has just, based on what I've read, and I don't know everything, but he's given people the permission to think. You know what I'm saying? And to move faster. And I hope people don't take advantage of it because there are, but for the most part, people are going to fight. The reward for cures, don't get me wrong, the reward, like the subscription, like I get it. Pharmaceutical subscription model, they want to keep people sick, right? But there's a different world where the cure is literally like the jackpot. The cure is the jackpot. And you try to get the cure. And the faster we're able to get cures, the more likely that people won't try to drag out and profit off your misery, for as long as they can. If people can get to these solutions faster, they won't feel the need to like, okay, we got a drug that work. All right, we're going to stretch this until, like, at least I hope. So that's my take on all that shit.
Cool. That's a good one. That's a good way to end it. Let's wrap it up, y'all.
1, 2,
Yeah. let's do it.